Okay, now that we've built our relationships within the data model, let's start using these to run some pivot table reports. We want to be able to show you how to access the PowerPivot pivot tables, which are a little bit different than just doing normal pivot tables. And then also, once you start building these up, you want to, best practice is to remove as a choice the ability to pull a value from the transaction table that you're going to filter on. Always only pull it from the lookup tables. And I'll show you what that means here in a minute. So we're back to this, and we've set this up. So now these are the filters. These are how we're going to cut the data. When we ask any questions, we're always going to be cutting based on our lookups. I want to know things like, what is my quantity based on store? And it can be multiple. I might want to have a store ID that has this particular brand that is purchased by the person with the last name Tiger. So there's all these different queries that you can start building now that we built this relationship. But let's reproduce the one that we did a couple of videos ago. So how can we build the pivot table? Well, one way you can do it is within the data model, right there, you can build a pivot table there. And you can build a pivot table, and it's going to ask you, do you want to do it in a new worksheet or existing worksheet? And there you go. You can put it anywhere you want. That's one way to do it, is to access it here, right there. Well, another way, I'm going to close this out. Another way you can do this. So now here's just the regular old spreadsheet. And we know we've got a lot of stuff in it. We've got our data model. We've brought in data, but this actual nice clean spreadsheet doesn't have anything in it. But I can still go build a pivot table. And it's going to ask you, where do you want to get the data? Well, normally we would just go grab a data set. And that's common. But in this case, we're not going to do this. We're going to use the workbook's data model. Here's the key. And it correctly guesses, I guess because there's no data in this data set. But this is what we want to use. And then it's again, where do you want to put the pivot table report or the pivot? And you can put it in the existing worksheet. Sure, I'll put it right there. And I'm going to do this. Now, look at the difference. We still have this on the side here that's going to be our pivot report, but look over here. This is the power of PowerPivot. You now have multiple data sources. When we were doing this originally, you had exactly one table. Now we've got all of these tables that we brought in, which can be a little bit overwhelming. You need to be intimate with these, but let's go ahead and do what we're wanting to do. Let's do the original question. What percentage of 1997 transactions were purchased by customers who had 4 or more children? Let's do the same thing. Now what you're going to do is, first of all, go to the customer, and these are alphabetized lists, so you're going to the field that has total children, which happens to be this one, and I'm going to bring it in. And there you go, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like what we had before. Now, and here's the key, now you've got to go to the transactions table, because this is the total transactions. You don't want to be in this one anymore, and you want to, and we're going to do a count. Now I'm going to bring in the quantity, but then I'm going to turn this from a sum and turn it into a count, because I'm just counting the number of transactions. And this is the same thing we had before. Here are the total number of transactions. We have about 87,000. It looks like 4 and 5 add up to about 25,000 of these, or 30%. Again, we can do the same thing before. What I did before is I showed the value as a percent of the column table, total. I'm also going to build a graph. Let's go build a pivot chart. I'll build a pie. I'm going to right click on one of these and format the data series. That's not what I meant to do. I want to right click on this and add data labels. There you go. And there's the 2 numbers that were up there. And you can also do, and you can format these data labels. And maybe I also want to show the category name. There you go. So there's my 4 and my 5, and these all total about 30%. So the same thing as before, except Now I'm not limited. If I wanted to do another question and the question is, oh no, that's not what I meant. I wanted what percentage of these were that 4 more children, and I want to say at home. Well, if I was doing this in my other file or without using these, I would have to go build another VLOOKUP in my original data file. But now I'm just going to go back to this, and I'm going to go back up to my customer lookup and number of children at home. I don't want to cut this by total children. I want to cut it by number of children at home. Very different story. Now my 4 and 5 are, these two are about, what is that, about 5.5% or so. So it's very different when you're looking at children at home. So, and look how quickly we were able to do this. Now we're going to, that's part of what you're going to be doing, is starting to answer some questions using pivot tables, but you now have weapons, a tool that is multiple data sets. Well, let me give you some best practices. Anytime you go over and I'm going to open up the data model back, and I'm going to go to the diagram view, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. Anytime you build your one-to-many relationships, you never ever want to cut the data on these. You don't want those to be a choice. So over here, when you're in the transactions table, you don't want the user to see any of these. The only one that you want to see is that, because all of the cutting is going to be occurring up here. So once you set this up, go to your many relationships and hide all these as choices. So look what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click. I right click on this and hide. Right click, hide. And the only, look at this, the only thing that I need in my transactions then is quantity. That's it. And now when I look at my transactions, boom, that's it. I can't ever screw up by pulling in a field that I'm going to filter from another table. So you're going to have to, when you use these, you're going to have to understand that some of these tables are your data cutters or your lookup tables, and some of these tables are the things that you're interested in. And you need to be able to understand that they can occur many times here, but these are the keys where we cut the data based on this to get information about this one. Thanks.